Hi, I'm Dan Whittaker. I'm here today to analyse the golf swing of Martin Kaymer. Martin's the current world number 2, and what we're going to do is going to look at the things he's worked at in his swing, the changes he's made over the past couple of seasons, what he continues to work at, and what are the strengths in his golf swing that allow it to stand up under pressure so well. Okay, Martin's got quite a different kind of look to his golf swing. It's not your traditional modern golf swing in terms of just being almost close to being two turns like Matteo Manassero, as he takes it away a little bit steep with it a touch closed and lets it set very late. As he lets it set late, we're going to notice how he's letting the club face open up a bit later in the swing, and he's then able to hold this coming through the golf ball, but through hip high to hip high through the golf ball is absolutely unreal. So let's have a look at what makes this golf swing tick. What we see is in the first move here, we see that Martin takes it away pretty one-piece-ish, but he doesn't allow the right side to turn away quite as deep as he could. In other words, the right hip doesn't turn back in this direction here, and the shoulder going back. He tends to take it a little bit away with the arms, but he does keep the club shaft on the line with which it started on right here. He traces that line in the first move, okay? But what he actually does is go outside of that line, if anything, as we can see here. And the club is a little bit closed down. And now, what we then see is it starts to work up. Now, at this point, there is very little rotation in the golf swing. There's very little left arm rotation, very little right hip movement, or right shoulder movement. And the chest hasn't actually moved that much, okay? And so it's more like a pick-up type first move. But the thing that's making it work fantastic is the arms have been kept in front of him. You know, a lot of amateurs make the mistake of sucking the club behind them when they take away with just the arms, whereas Martin's done the exact opposite and kept it in front of him. Okay. Now what we actually see is as we continue taking it back from here, we see that the club tends to set in quite late. So it's setting very, very late here. And as it started to set here, okay, the big thing that he's done is he's managed to keep the right elbow in front of the body. So it's in front of the hip and not behind him over in this direction here where the arrow is pointing right now. It's not over here. It's actually right in front of the hip here, which is a big key for him. It allows him to keep the arms in front of the body. He hasn't got that much hip depth here, but when we compare this to what it looked like a couple of years ago, which I'm just going to bring an old view of his swing in now, onto the left-hand screen, we will see that it's a lot more rounded than it was then. So this is in 2008 at the British Open. It's a slightly different view. It's more kind of looking in at him this way, whereas this right-hand one's straight down the line. What we see is, once again, we see this first move very armsy. If anything, more armsy than it is on the new one on the right-hand side here, because the face is a lot more shut down. Okay, but what we do tend to see is, even though it's shut down, we then see it coming up very vertically and with very little right hip movement in terms of creating any depth. But once again, we see the elbow in front of the body and the arms are completely in front of the body. Take the swing back to the same positions here. We see there's a lot more depth on the right hand screen. So this is suggesting that Martin, with his coach, is working at the right hip working backwards along with the right shoulder to create the depth to the turn that allows the arms to have some space coming down into the golf ball. The one on the left hand screen from 2008 didn't have that much room going back, but what he has always done is, because the arms are in front here, he's always unwound very hard, and with the arms being in front of the body, he's always been able to play with a very passive club face. So the arms have stayed in front, and he's then just allowed the club to work around, but hit it with a very, very passive golf club rather than the face being very active. On the right here, we see that it's coming quite steep here, and it's setting late. Now, the late setting, or the float loading as it can be called, is kind of characteristic of people who are going to hit it quite a long way at times, but the way that Martin's put a lot of distance on in the last few years has been to get a bit more hip depth. one of the things that sets him apart is his accuracy with his longer clubs. Now what you can see is now coming down here, the arms are in front of the body, but the shaft isn't very shallow. Okay, what I mean by that is it's above the forearm plane here, and ideally, if you want to hit it a long way, you're trying to get the shaft coming in as shallow as you can here, with the arms in front of the body, a la a Sergio Garcia or a Hogan type move. But what he does is he has a very Ben Hogan-esque type release here. In other words, the club is very, very passive. Okay, you see here how the club face has stayed very, very passive, and is actually square to the arc coming through here. So as after the ball's been struck, the club's working around with the body, but the club face here is super passive. We've marked these in here. Just a second, we're going to actually see that this is the arc coming through, sorry. And we can see how square this club face is to it. He's going there, and we can see how square that club face is staying through those stages on the way through. Which actually goes with what his ball flight is, which is a slight fade. You know, technically it's probably a very slight pull fade, because it's not a fade that's attacking from the inside, it's a little bit steep going back. Okay, and we can see that he tends to hold the face open a little here and doesn't fully release it. Now, this is all attributed to the slightly steeper backswing here with the arms more in front of the body. If he got more depth in the backswing, therefore the club could attack from more inside, and he'd be able to allow the face to release a little more without fearing it starting left and going left. You know, the classic double cross, as it used to always be referred to. Now, I think that the more right shoulder and right hip depth he gets in the backswing, we're going to see this club attacking shallower, and he's then going to be able to hit the draw more reliably. Whereas his stock shot, like I say, is a slight little pull fade at the moment. One of the things that he works fantastically well for him is how stable his golf swing is. We have a look at it here from the front view, and we can see as he makes this backswing how centered he has stayed. Though he isn't deep with the right hip, he hasn't rocked off the golf ball a lot. In fact, he hasn't rocked off it at all. Okay, if we highlight the head position right here, and we take it back, the camera's moving a little, but we can see that he's not moved off the golf ball at all in terms of lateral motion. So he's stayed in what would be termed as quite a centered pivot. So from here, he can then really begin to unwind hard, because he's not going to make any movement to get over this left pivot point here. He's got very little movement to make to get there, so he can start to unwind around in this direction very, very quickly. So he makes a slight little movement there from the left knee and the left hip. The arms are already in front of the body, and then he simply just holds onto his leverage, as we see here, and really just kind of almost holds the face open, if you like. But this works sensationally well from him being a little bit steep. When we have a look from down the line here with Martin, we're going to put in Ben Hogan next to him. Now you can see here that when we take Martin to the top and you take Hogan to the top, you see how Hogan's created so much more depth of turn in the right hip and right shoulder. The elbow position is quite similar, but because Martin hasn't created the depth of turn, his right side's gone a bit higher in the backswing, which has made the elbow position look different. It's actually technically exactly the same position. But if we shallowed out this right hip and right shoulder, what that would then do is it would change the location of the shaft. Okay, but as he's in the position he is now, we see here him coming down when the left arm is kind of around parallel to the ground here. And let's pull Hogan into left arm parallel to the ground. Same left arm position right there now, yet a completely different look at the golf shaft. Golf shaft for Martin, very steep. Comparison to Hogan, very shallow. So Hogan would therefore be able to have more control over his shot shaping, because the club's going to be attacking more from the inside, and we'll just see more of an aggressive rotation, whereas Martin does open up a lot with the body, but we'll see it's a little bit more of an extended right arm and a little bit more down, kind of extended down and away, but still going around with the passive face, whereas Hogan, everything's moving through together because the backswing's so much more synced up. What we'll then see is when we see the club reappear over here on the left-hand side with Hogan, it's very shallow, whereas Martin, the face is held more open. Okay, another look at Hogan from a different shot will show us what the club face is doing, how he released it. So I know this is a wood that we're going to bring in now, but we're going to then see the kind of release that he used. Let's just make it so we can actually see what's going on. See how shallow the club is coming in here. Then we see it releasing here. So it's a lot more released around. When we see the club face in this one, we really see how shallow it's coming in here. Left arm parallel to ground, shaft's really super shallow there. Now let's pull Martin back to the same position so we can actually highlight it. You know, we can see there the complete different look of the golf shaft. So Martin kind of, although he keeps on turning, has to let the right arm move away a little because they aren't synced up to the pivot as they were as Hogan's were at the top. And what we see here with Hogan is this very aggressive release around. We see the club face is very released here. So the club face is actually pointing down. You can't get a club face any more release than this. Whereas we look at Martin's, it's kind of held onto a bit more and held open more into this position here. Hogan's is more right there. So they've both got a very passive club face working through the ball, so in other words letting physics do the job of squaring the face up, but Martin is having to hold on to it more because of where the arms have attacked from, but Hogan can let it release more because he's attacking from more shallow. So he will open up more through the ball as he lets the butt of the club swing around to the left more aggressively. And this has to happen as the club's attacking from more inside with the face more open, so it allows him to attack it with more speed, because if he didn't open up as aggressively, he'd never square it up. As we see here, he's very aggressive, the right elbow's more on the hip, and he's allowed the butt of the club to swing around to let the face open. Martin, on the other hand, has had the arms coming in front of him here, but then just held onto that leverage and maintained the face staying square and kind of held it open, if anything. I believe that he's made a huge difference in what he was doing in 2008 to what he's doing now in terms of the depth of turn in the backswing. But I think if he shallows it out more with a bit more left arm rotation in the backswing and more right hip depth and shoulder depth to get the club working more around his body, we would see him be able to attack it with even more speed and therefore increase his distance and therefore have the draw on tap a little bit more. As we can see why it is so reliable, this golf swing, because the club face is passive through the impact zone, and we can see why the guy is currently the world #2. Hopefully with a little bit of work, continuation of the work that he's been doing with his coach in shallowing out the swing, I think we could even see him go on to be the one that really challenges for the domination in the world game with Tiger. So I hope you've all enjoyed the analysis, and if you have any questions you can contact me at Dan Whittaker at btconnect.com. Thanks a lot.